again, we could have them available for viewing for those who may not be able to attend this live stream session. So at this point, we're all live now, and we'll be commencing at 3:30. We have here a group of individuals who have been working diligently, leading the charge, I would say, leading the charge with our development of our reopening plan. We have on the high school level, Ron Agustinoni, who's a high school principal, who's leading the charge with our group there. From the middle school level, we have Robin Gories, the Gowanna Middle School principal, who's leading the charge at the middle school level. And from the elementary school, we have Andrew Hill and Greg Pace, who are leading the charge at the middle school level. And overseeing a lot of the instructional initiative, Dr. Elizabeth Wood, who's our deputy superintendent. Again, I'm sure our faculty and staff know everyone on this call, but for the purposes of people who may be viewing this from the outside, we want to make sure that we have our introductions clear. Also, we have Kelly DeFisciani, who's our public information officer. Kelly has been logging and will be logging questions that come in and sharing those questions with me. So at the end, we'll try to address those questions. We recognize that many questions will be actually addressed through the presentation. And so we hope that at the end, the questions that we'll be addressing will be things that might be new or different, so to speak, or a different slant than what we anticipated. So we'll address those at the end of the presentation as well. And we have Ken McDermott here in case we need any technical support as we move forward. So the purpose of this information session is just that. It's informational. And I say that because, yes, everyone would like to know what's our final plans. What does this plan mean for me? What's the exact implication on me? However, the reality of it is, as you will see, it's a pretty comprehensive model. Lots of proverbial moving parts as we plan forward. So we hope that you will gather and you have some information to quite frankly, with your help, ease your mind in some instances. Two, for you to see how you can further contribute to address the various details that we'll be addressing over the course of the next month or so. We recognize, again, that there are many questions that people have, and there will be questions that people have today, tomorrow, and beyond that as well. So we understand that because we know that this is a process. We're going through a process to develop a comprehensive plan that's constantly being reviewed and refined and refined. As I said, today is July 21st. July 21st was big different than June 21st. And it's going to be a big difference from August 21st and September 21st. And I think it's important for people to know that. And we are truly trying to manage ambiguity in many ways as we move forward. So we ask people to be patient with the process, to look to contribute to the process in a constructive way. And hopefully collectively, we will develop the best plan for our students here at Shenandoah Schools. So we have already had a session that was focused largely on K5/K6 to some degree. The reason why we'll clarify 6 in a second, Mrs. Gories will do so as a part of her presentation. This session is largely focused on middle and high school level faculty and staff. And later on this evening, we have a session that's largely designed for parents. And we will repeat this process again tomorrow. So we're looking for many different ways of communicating with our respective stakeholders as we move forward. So I'm going to share my screen in a presentation that will guide our conversations here today as we move forward. So just bear with me one second as I go through the process of sharing my screen. And I'm going to ask my apologies here. I'm going to ask Dr. Wood, are you able to see my presentation loading at this point?
Yes.
So thank you very much. So this presentation, as I said before, we hope that will address many of the questions that are being asked, contemplated, or even being concerning to teachers, staff, students, parents alike. As the title implies, we're looking to redefine being ready, reimagining what we do here at Shen and trying to do it better under the circumstances that we're all faced with. A key premise that this plan is based upon, or should I say the framework for this plan is based upon, is maximizing opportunities for in-person learning. not only is it a directive or edict, if you will, from the state level, but it's also, as a school district, we want to create opportunities for students to be back in person in a safe way, in a productive way as we move forward. I'll quickly walk through the agenda so people have some sense of what to come. I'm going to provide an overview of our framework. I will walk through some of the survey results as well. And then we will transition to Dr. Wood, who will focus on our instructional programming, again, with an emphasis on equity and opportunities and outcomes. And will be facilitated conversations with Mr. Hills from Oranjan, Greg Pace from Tasago, Robin Goris from the middle school, and Ron Agustinoni from the high school. And we'll conclude this by reviewing questions that came either prior to this or came during this presentation as well. So that's the roadmap for the next hour and a half of this conversation. It's important for people to know that as we plan forward, we're true to our North Star. And our North Star as a school district in terms of our commitment to excellence is assessing the needs of our students through an equity lens. So we're asking three critical questions. What else can we do to make school and classroom experience more relevant? We're asking the question, how can we be more responsive to the cultural shifts and capitalize on the emerging changes that are occurring right now as we speak? We are also asking, what else can we do to ensure equity and outcomes? That's the axiomatic question. How do we ensure that we are best meeting the needs of all of our students, recognizing that particularly what we're faced with, some of those situations are particularly challenging. However, we're committed to do so as much as feasible, possible, and practicable. So as we plan forward, we use this notion of tent posts, trying to figure out where do we lay out the map and subsequently then start providing the details to bring all this to a head. In order to do so, we needed to have the parameters from the respective state agencies. 4 entities that impact what we do: the governor's office, the state education department, the New York State Health Department, and clearly us as a school system, the collective us, everyone who makes up the Shen system. So can keep that in mind as we go through this presentation. The New York State, the governor's office came out with what I term as guardrails. Essentially, the governor outlined the parameters for opening of schools. The parameter was based upon a formula of 5% or less infection rate over a 14-day period. They'll be analyzing that. Or also the parameters for closing of schools, looking at a regional infection rate greater than 9% based upon a 7-day average. The governor will make a final decision in terms of will we be allowed to have in-person class, or will we be all virtual, hybrid? All those things are still very much left in the hands of the governor. And that decision is supposed to be made the week of August 1st through the 7th. I say that because we are planning based upon the assumptions and based upon the objective of trying to have in-person, on-site educational provisions as much as possible, as much as feasible, considering all the respective parameters that we are dealt with. The second piece from the governor's recent announcement was guidance should be left up for local school districts to develop plans. However, that then led to the state education department. The state education department came out with a series of documents that outline guidelines and guardrails, as well as various regulations that the state is looking to change, looking to relax, looking to waive as we plan forward. This list is not meant to be exhaustive. It's simply an indication of some of the key ones that we started looking at in terms of allowing additional flexibility for us to plan forward. For example, unit of study, at least 180 minutes, 3 hours of instructional time per week. And so that's something that we have to look at very closely as we move forward. The science lab experiences for students, AIS, health screening, home instruction, incidental teaching. All those are factors that are critical for us, particularly, say, the incidental teaching one, allowing for 10 classroom hours outside of certification area, allowing, again, additional flexibility as we plan forward. So there's countless pages and pages of regulations that the state education department is have either released, looking at, and we're trying to follow those things as we go along in developing the details of our plan. The big document the state education department came out with was this document, Recovering, Rebuilding, Renewing the Spirit of New York Schools. I want to pause here and let people know that this presentation will be made available possibly by the end of the week, probably more realistically Monday or Tuesday of next week, because there's certain links on here that we're still working on to have some of those final plans submitted. So we will be sharing this presentation out so people can look at these, click on these hyperlinks and look at those documents as well. And this is just an indication of one of those documents. This is the state education document, the big guideline document that came out last week that we have been clearly following as we develop our plan as we move forward. So that just gives you an indication of the things that we're trying to do as a system. The state portal for submission, and I use the word submission in quote because it's more of an attestation of the things that we will be doing as a system. That portal was open on July 17th, and we need to submit our plan by July 31st. Clearly, there's a lot of work to be done in that short window, and we're committed to doing the work. And this conversation, this engagement with stakeholders is a part of that process. So more to come on that as we move forward with this presentation. The second entity, or should I say the third entity, meaning the first being the governor's office, second being the state education department, the third entity that has a significant impact on what we do moving forward is the Department of Health, the New York State Department of Health. The New York State Department of Health also released a comprehensive guidance document that again, we're using as guardrails as we develop our plan here at Shen. That plan focuses on people, places, and processes, and a lot of details in terms of the things that the mandatory requirements that we must adhere to as a system, as well as some best practice recommendations. And so these hyperlinks on this presentations are the things that outline the mandatory, those type things as well. I would like to also point out that we have been working diligently as a region. The capital region, BOCES, in many ways are leading the conversation, the charge across the entire state of New York. We are fortunate to have a lot of great colleagues in this region, and we have extended out those opportunities to engage colleagues from across the region. So a regional approach is important because what one system does has an impact on the next system. So we're taking a very regional approach on many aspects of what we do here at Shenandoah as well. A third or fourth component to gathering feedback and information, we issued a survey and almost 1,800 respondents to that survey. The large majority of those respondents, about 81%, were parents. And as expected, because when we look at the data across the country, recognize, and I want to emphasize this point, that where we are in New York as a whole, as a state, particularly where we are here, Shenandoah in the capital region in upstate New York, the rate of infection is minimal in comparison to the unfortunate realities that's taking place, particularly in some of our southern states. And so when we start thinking about confidence in returning to school, we know that parents have varied feelings in terms of their readiness, if you will, to have their children return to school. We know that employees are at different points in the continuum in terms of their readiness to return to school. This survey is reflective of what we're seeing, some of the trend data, as we look at some of the national trend data as well. So right now, it's about 17% saying that they're very confident in returning, 20% say they're confident, 28%, almost 29% say they're unsure. And then you have still about 27, 28% of people saying, well, no, I'm not confident. And some of that is, quite frankly, you're not knowing. Some of that is various factors that people are dealing with in their personal lives. So there are many, many reasons that lend to how people perceive their confidence in returning to school in the fall of 2020. We also know that there are some parents right now who are saying that I will not be sending my child back to school. That's about 6% of those who responded to the survey. So this survey is indicative of what we're hearing and seeing across the country as well. We asked about transportation because transportation is such a linchpin in our planning process. We could have the best plan for schools, but we have to get kids to school. And so this survey gives us an indication about 44% of those who responded saying right now, yes, I will use transportation. And we were talking about some of those parameters related to transportation in a second. About 38% of people saying no. And again, I don't want to be rude or disrespectful into saying that the way we think right now on July 22nd, July 21st, I'm sorry, will be different the way we think in August and the way we think in September and the way we think in October and November. And we know those things will change. However, as a system, we have to plan with the assumption that every child would want or need the capacity for transportation, for example. So those are big pieces. Access to technology is a big part of the process because regardless if we're remote or not, we know that we will be integrated and utilizing technology significantly more than we have done in the past. And so access to technology becomes a big piece of it. And so this survey has shown about 90% of those who responded say that they have access to a laptop or Chromebook or some type of device at home. And we're focused on trying to ensure that we're supporting our students as best as possible and supporting our faculty and staff as they engage students via technology as we move forward. So that's the reason why we asked that question. There were also a number of comments that came from this survey, and hours were spent between myself, Mrs. DeFisiani, Mrs. Ford Werther, combing through all those comments, all those questions, hours of time to try to see where we saw commonalities in questions, to try to see if there were questions or thoughts or comments people made that we didn't take into consideration as we formulate the framework and as we plan forward. And again, I won't necessarily walk through every bullet point, but these are placed on here as an indication for those people who took the time to commit and complete the survey, as well as people who might be committed and submitted questions right now. We read those questions, we look at those questions, we try to see how those questions influence our thought process, influence our decision making, influence execution of our plans. And so this is just indication from mask to temperatures, all those things, again, to bathroom faucets being turned off automatically. We'll be addressing those as a part of this presentation as well. Series of questions, what will a classroom look like? How will services such as speech will be provided in a mask and tight quarters? Special education folks are working on some of those plans as we move forward. So again, I shared this to you not to necessarily go through each one of those questions, but to give you indication that we really do take the time to go through those questions, to look at the comments, because it helps us make a better decision. And at the end of the day, we want to make the best possible decision we can, looking at the guidance from the state education department, looking at the guidance from the state health department, looking at the questions and concerns and feedback from our faculty, staff, students, teachers, our stakeholders, and looking at best practices across the country. So a lot of time and a significant amount of time committed by many people to understand how do we best do something that, quite frankly, that was never done before. And we're confident here at Shen, we will put together, we have a great framework, and we will ultimately have a great plan for execution as we move forward. So with that being said, I just want to transition then through the questions. You see here countless questions that we gathered as we move forward. The New York State Department of Health came out with some very specific protocols. For example, this is an example of the return to work protocol that was office-based. Some of you may know our offices were open all summer. Myself personally, I've been in work every day since March 13th when we went virtual. Every day I'm in the office. Quite frankly, when I say every day, there are Saturdays and Sundays. Most Saturdays and Sundays, you come here in the morning, I'm here as well. And so these protocols are used to develop the plans that we have executed. A prime example of that is this summer right now, we have the extended school year program for certain special education students on site. And we use those protocols to develop this particular document that was used to reopen for the ESY program as well. So that's just an indication as to how those documents from the state, be it the state education department or the state health department, are used to develop protocols. We have training protocols. We have a daily health screening process. That's one of the requirements from the state education department as well as the state health department. And so we have a daily health screening tool. every morning by 5 a.m. Those who are returning to work on a daily basis, myself, we get an email that we have to complete this self-certified form. And that form is done by everyone every morning. We have to go through it, look at the symptoms, assign the symptoms, and fill this form out. And it's a self-reporting piece that every employee will be asked to complete upon return to school. And part of that is talk about temperature. And if your temperature is above 100, you should not be returning to the workspace, not only for employees, but that same thing applies for students. And the regulations speak about doing it prior to arrival at work at schools. So again, as we start to send out more communication, these links will be provided to our employees to make sure that everyone has them. Anyone who's working right now is required to complete this health screening process, and it's being done right now by many employees who are on site currently working. Contact tracing is a big part of this. So we'll be asking employees to sign in so we know who was here, who was in what building when. So in case we have a situation of a known infection, we could quickly go back and isolate where, when, who could be potentially impacted and trace backward very quickly for that purposes, as well as for disinfection purposes. Again, these are all outlined in the health department regulations, as well as the New York State Education Department regulations. So we're following those things very closely. Face covering is required by students and staff. And one of the things that we're trying to do to make it easy, we have in fact, in the process of purchasing face masks for students. And if you can see this graphic on the screen, we'll be planning to have different school names on the face mask that will be available for every student, one for every student. They're washable, and as well as for our employees. So we want to ensure that we provide people with the necessary PPEs to do what they need to do. The exception for wearing a face covering would be when kids are having meals. Instruction is designed to be 6 feet apart. So in some cases in instruction spaces, face masks will be relaxed and for short breaks and those kind of things. Again, social distancing and face masks is an essential part of our plan. Speaking of social distancing, a lot of time has been expended on looking at classroom spaces and capacity. And right now we know that we can effectively have 18 desks in most, if not all, of our classrooms. In fact, we have spaces where we know we can accommodate more. So the 18 becomes, if you want to say, our sweet spot as we move forward. But we do recognize that there are spaces that we will and can accommodate more students and still comply or abide with the spatial relations requirements from the state education department as well as the state health department. And this is just a picture, if you will, of the elementary school classroom, where essentially the classroom has been decluttered, and it's not an insult when I say decluttered. Essentially, we took out furnishing that were not essential. So it's a teacher desk in classrooms, and student desk is essentially what you see in the classroom spaces across the district. So a lot of time spent by myself personally, as well as with Barb Saliker and her custodial maintenance crew, walking in and reshuffling classrooms. This is a middle school classroom to give you an indication of that as well as we move forward. This is a high school classroom, as that picture comes up, that we have looked at all the different spaces, all the different configuration, trying to figure out how do we support the cohort model of having a certain number of kids in certain spaces to minimize transitions and things of that nature. We're looking at repurposing certain spaces as we move forward, be it libraries, gymnasiums, different things, computer labs. So how do we maximize spaces? How do we maximize capacity as much as possible as we move forward? In addition to that, we're looking at where we can't have the 6 feet. How do we use physical barriers to create those spatial pieces? Again, all those things are consistent with the guidelines from the Department of Health. This is an example of looking at some of the workrooms at the high school. This is a high school, one of the high school east workroom. As you see, things have been repositioned and cleaned thoroughly to reposition desk and having file cabinet separation and having 6 feet separations between those. Yes, which means we have less desk in workrooms, but we're trying to find additional spaces to have those desks relocated. This is the high school west, one of the high school west workroom. Again, everything has been repositioned, cleaned thoroughly. Again, preparing for utilization of those places from faculty and staff upon return. Transition in hallways is a big part of that. We're looking at where we can, having one-way directional transition in hallways, recognizing that can be a challenge at times, having signage all throughout the buildings that talk about walkways and hallways, trying to minimize congestions in hallways, eliminate locker room use, any places where we can have large groups of kids congregating, trying to minimize and or eliminate those possibilities of congestions in hallways or some of those common spaces as we move forward. The health services requirement, again, the Department of Health came out with clear guidelines. We have a single point person, Mrs. Carmen, Rebecca Carmen, has been working very closely with health professional nurses, outside providers to develop training plans, to look at signs and symptoms. We have a draft plan currently online to look at training videos for health and hygiene, helping students and staff. How do you wash your hands? How do you put on your PPE correctly? All those things that might seem common sense, we cannot leave any of those things up to chance. And so, so we're putting those things on video. Plus, quite frankly, it's a requirement that we do so as well. Looking at vulnerable populations, we know that we have vulnerable populations of students, vulnerable populations of staff, and how do we try to address those needs as well? So we're working through those protocols as we speak, be it contractual protocols, be it legal protocols, or be it practical protocols. So we're looking at those things as we move forward. Having protocols for contact tracing becomes a big piece of the equation as well, because we hope we never have a case, but in case we do, we want to be able to effectively backtrack and mitigate that circumstance as quickly as possible as we move forward. Even within health offices, trying to identify, we're in the process this week of identifying containment areas or isolation areas where someone who might be displaying a symptom that we can contain until that person, either be a student, get picked up to go home, or an employee goes home as well. So we're trying to create those capacity. Again, that's a requirement by the state health department, but it only makes sense to do so. We have protocols in case someone was, in fact, after a COVID case, how do they return to work? Becomes a big part of that. So all these protocols are in place, and all these protocols will be made available to employees as we move forward. Even protocols about school closure. When we have a case, how do we shut down? The rules have changed from last time. Right now, there's a possibility of isolating potentially infected areas for 24 hours. So instead of you have a single case in a school, instead of shutting down the entire school, we can isolate a case. And that's the reason why when we start talking about the models for instructional delivery, a big part of that model is how do we ensure that we try to keep the cohort, how do we minimize transition of kids throughout the building as much as possible, so we could do some of this isolation if we have to do those isolation, not only from the standpoint of addressing the medical issue, but also from the disinfectant of areas as we move forward. So mental health supports is also a big part of what we're looking at in terms of mental health supports, not only for students, but also mental health supports for our staff as we move forward. Disinfecting and cleaning is a major priority. And just to give you, again, an indication, right now, the CDC came out with some very clear guidelines surrounding cleaning, and we're following those guidelines. We have been following those guidelines for the past several months, and we continue to follow those guidelines as we move forward. We have specialized equipment that we have purchased and using now to be able to sanitize spaces very quickly, as well as our buses, sanitized buses between shifts or between runs becomes a big part of our process. Providing resources for cleaning, resources for people wiping down their personal desks or their computers or their phones, or having hand sanitizer or bathroom soap dispensers, and all those things readily available all the time to, again, address the hygiene protocols that we need to ensure that people are adhering to fully. Having touch-free paper towel dispensers. Those kind of things people don't think about. Significant undertaking from a cost perspective, going in, trying to redo all those things in bathrooms across the district. Looking at maintenance and grounds protocol. Looking at filtration and ventilation. As some of you might be aware, in order for malls to reopen, they had to have certain ventilation systems in malls. Our standards here at Shen were actually at that standard prior to COVID, and we have since ramped that standard up in terms of the rating of our filtration, and not only the rating of our filtration, the frequency of how often we change filters. And just to give you some example, in most people's houses, you change your filter in your heating and air system once a year. Here at Shen, we were doing it twice a year anyway. And right now we're gearing up to start doing 4 times a year. So we're going well beyond the requirements or the expectations for those kind of things. Ventilation of fresh air coming to classrooms. Those things will be maximized based upon the temperature of weather outside. So the combination of those things trying to ensure, again, we're addressing filtration and ventilation, meeting or exceeding the recommendations from the state as well. So those are huge pieces that we need to look forward to. Even things like movement and deliveries in buildings. When people come to deliver, trying to minimize the exposure from outside individuals into buildings, be it contractors or people coming for contracted services. How do we ensure that we minimize those things? Delivery to buildings. How do we ensure that we have designated delivery areas? Having separate egress and egress so people aren't crossing in doorways as much. And so all those things are plans that will be documented, signage that will be visible throughout buildings to make those things clear and evident, minimizing visitors to buildings. Unless there's official business, visitors will be largely minimized to school buildings as we move forward. Transportation is a major part of this dilemma, or should I say this equation that we're trying to solve. And the transportation department has been working feverishly over the last several months, looking at various scenarios, various analysis. Students will be required to wear masks on buses. We do recognize that certain students, because of health condition or otherwise, may not be able to do so. We're dealing with some of that right now with our ESY programs, and transportation accommodation will be made accordingly for that. But those are the exceptions. So the general rule is students will be wearing masks on buses. Right now, our target is about 50% capacity on bus. What I mean by that, right now, our large buses is about 66 pupils. We're looking at anywhere from about 36 to 40 pupils on a bus. We will allow siblings to sit together. In fact, the regulations allow siblings to sit together on a bus, and disinfecting a bus is a big piece of it. As I said, we've invested a lot of money in equipment to be able to disinfect buses in a very short time frame, so those buses can be ready to go on a route again. We will be encouraging parents. We will be encouraging parents to transport their students, recognizing that, quite frankly, it creates greater capacity for us to get students to school faster and turn around and address the needs of other students, be it outside placements, private placements, and all the various places that we transport students to as a school district. Food service is a major part of this equation, looking at our cafeterias and looking at social distancing, creating seated parameters within our cafeterias, looking at prepackaged meals to try to avoid kids standing in line and the serving process that has typically gone long, looking at prepackaged meals, looking at small groups. The possibility of classroom delivery of lunches is something that we're right now planning out as we move forward. So food service plans are being developed as we speak to address the ability for us to provide students with a lunch. Even for our faculty and staff, looking at what we quote unquote lunchroom areas in those places, recognizing that social distances is a priority. So how do we try to do so? How do we provide cleaning, disinfectant materials in those spaces so people can wipe down frequently touched areas on a regular basis as throughout the course of the day as well. So food service not only impacts students, but it also impacts our faculty and staff. And so those are some of the major operational type things that we're in the process of planning for. Plans are being finalized. Plans will continue to be finalized. And I just want to emphasize that point that some people may get on this call and asking, tell me, how does this impact me? And you may get some of that, and some of that you will not get, because the reality of it is a lot of this will still be planning into the month of August. We still be fine tuning in September, and we still be learning from and making modifications in October and November. And so we ask people to recognize the fluid nature of things. We ask people to be flexible, but more important, we ask people to truly come with an open mindset to constructively contribute to the conversation. There's a tremendous amount of challenges that we're facing as a school system, that we're facing as a society, and we know that we have a lot of expertise, and we want to tap into that expertise in a way that we can constructively use the information to fine-tune the best possible plan to provide for our students. And so with that being said, I'm going to transition to Dr. Wood, who's going to talk about this from the approach of teaching and learning and all the things that go into that. Dr. Wood.
Great, thank you. So when we pivoted last March and went to online learning, certainly believe fully everybody did the very best they could. Teachers, students, parents, given the situation we were confronted with. And there are definitely lessons learned from our experience March through June. One of them being how challenging it is for parents of young children who are trying to teach their children at home and in some cases do their jobs, and also the importance of having our youngest students on site as much as possible. So we started the plan with the idea that we wanted to have our younger grades on site, K-5, and then we extended that to grade 6 as well. So you'll hear more about that. Starting with a focus on engaging disengaged students, knowing that this is predominantly secondary teachers. I know some of you encountered that, where you had students who were disengaged, and based on the state plan and our continued work here, it will be really important that we continue to work to make sure all students are engaged in the learning process as we move forward. While we talk about bringing back students in K through 6 on a daily basis, there are students that are in self-contained special education programs that we will also be looking to have back on site every day. Students in the FSD, ISD, and MOVE program really do need that face-to-face interaction in school. Very challenging to deliver a lot of that content virtually. Also, English as a new language will continue to be delivered as comprehensively as possible. We are also currently looking at online opportunities for our students who fall in the vulnerable populations category, according to the state guidelines. Looking at a regional approach, recognizing it's going to be very challenging to run both an in-school model and a virtual model. We would be looking to coordinate that with other districts. We know that it's really important that our students have good quality access to technology at 612. We certainly didn't do the one-to-one rollout thinking that we were preparing for a pandemic, but it did serve us well when that situation arose. And we did issue a number of Chromebooks and or devices to our K-5 families who also had a need, and that will continue if we end up moving back to the virtual setting at any point next year. We will continue to prioritize the curriculum, focusing on what we know students need for the next grade level. All right, Dr. Robinson, the next slide, please. All right, so for the spring, we're looking to make some grading decisions, what we thought was best based on our quick transition to online. We rolled out the EOL, NYL, the evidence of learning or not yet learned, in alignment with many other school districts and even universities in some cases. And know that heading into the fall, we're going to be looking for something that's a little bit more specific, but not necessarily transitioning back to 101 different possibilities for grading structure. And so I know many of you were exposed to this on Superintendent's Conference Day in June, but looking at some sort of grading for hybrid learning, a standardized rubric with various levels of learning and certain written descriptions that fit categories, all the way down to not yet learned or not submitted, etc. So more on that to come as part of our professional learning plan as we roll forward, and also a grading guidance document for teachers and ultimately families to review as well. We are pulling together standards for online learning. There's a lot of resources that have been published in the last couple of months about the best approaches to online learning. We'll be sharing that with our teachers. Also, setting up some expectations if we were to move to the virtual world entirely, expectations for synchronous instruction, knowing that it's really important that students engage in real time with their teachers, and also going with that needs a fixed schedule so that folks aren't competing and wanting to access the same students at the same time. And we will get into more detail about what the 7-12 plan is while students are in school for synchronous and asynchronous instruction as we go through our presentation. We will be focusing on the social emotional learning aspects of the return to school and culturally responsive teaching and equity. We know many of our students who have been out have some anxiety about transitioning back to school, and we want to make sure that we are easing that process for them as they, and providing materials for you as teachers to be able to support our students coming back and support staff as well. We will be providing guidance on when to record and post Google Meet videos, such as when the teacher is teaching, when students at home may not be available, which we hope a lot of that will be real time, but there certainly will be opportunities for students to go back and review Google Meets and videos as well. Okay, Dr. Robinson, on to the next one. Thanks. Also, in the Superintendent's Conference Day in June, introduced secondary teachers to some information related to the standard setup of Google Classroom. Very important now that it's more a part of students' learning experience than ever, that the interface from a student perspective be consistent classroom to classroom. And so we've been working on setting up some guidelines for consistency across departments and courses. Also working on how to share information about Google Classroom with parents at grades 4 through 12. A lot of work is going on behind the scenes right now to prepare teachers for teaching in extended lessons, teaching in a block. We know we'd hoped really to have another year to roll that out, but you'll see as we move forward why it fits so well in the constraints that have been placed upon the school district. So a lot, professional development on that, teaching in extended time periods to come, professional development on how to support students' social emotional well-being. I already mentioned the piece on Google Classroom. I did not mention the fact that we are moving forward with a platform, grades kindergarten through 3rd grade. That was one area we were caught off guard with the transition to online. We did not have a platform for our youngest students, and it was a major challenge for our teachers, students, and their families. And so we have a new platform that we've purchased that should be user-friendly for the primary level. Okay, so now we'll shift into some more specifics, talking about what exactly our elementary program is going to be looking like within as much as we know at this point, which started with an analysis of space. So as you were working on preparing for the return to school, I'll ask Mr. Hills and Mr. Pace to provide some background information about the work that they've been doing at the elementary level.
The first thing we looked at was the capacity of the classrooms and what was the student number that we could get into our rooms. And we've got a standard number, we believe, at this time. Then we actually looked at removing some of the standard items that might be considered standard in an elementary room, and we were able to get even more students in there and still keep the students safe and 6 feet apart. So then we just looked at our staffing. We were able to get the students in the building. We were excited about that, and our goal is really to get everyone in. And that's an ongoing process, and we're getting close to that. And now we're going to be looking at the delivery of our content.
To follow up with that briefly, even as soon as this Friday, we are spending some time with some of the elementary teacher representatives to start to brainstorm some of the instructional delivery ideas. Between Mr. Pace and myself, we've certainly come up with a lot of ideas, but right now they need to be vetted appropriately with the support of our teachers and of our staff here at Shen, because there's a lot to go through. There's a lot of interesting opportunities that we have, but there's also a lot of minutia to work out. And it's all very much connected to how stakeholders are going to look at this and support this. And all of our models, though, anything we've looked at, and we are a little excited to share some of the ideas that are regional ideas as well as ideas specific to Shen. They need to be vetted appropriately, whether they're learning models or whether they're health and safety models. So.
Great, thank you. And speaking of that, I know safety has been something that has been on your mind the whole time as you've been doing this work. What are some of the things that you've been planning for at the elementary to safeguard the safety of students and teachers?
You know, specifically, there's the what Mr. Pace already talked about a little bit. He was talking about the reduction of transition of students throughout the school day. We'll have teachers going into student classrooms more than the students walking through the halls. It's very important to us. Social emotional learning, Mr. Pace will mention that a little bit more, I think, in a minute. But I just wanted to say that so much of the focus of all of our models are looking at to solve problems that have multiple opportunities. We're not going to solve any problem connected to health and safety that causes a problem with the educational models that we're doing. So there's the idea of, and you can see on the information in front of you here, the idea of synchronous and asynchronous learning that's happening. Synchronous would be a teacher in front of a student, but asynchronous will also be happening while the students are here at school. And what that means is there'll be some digital opportunities that students will still be learning digitally from teachers that are broadcasting from quite literally maybe a classroom across the hall from them.
Yeah, the students are going to be going through some, it's going to look different no matter where you're at, and it's going to look different at Shen. So, we just want to have those emotional supports there. I'm sure we have some teachers, secondary teachers who have students in my building or in others that are elementary age, and we are looking into that as well. We don't want this to be uncomfortable for them by any means, so that's always a consideration through this whole process.
Great, thank you. And can you talk a little bit about what content areas you're looking at prioritizing for the return to school for our students?
Yeah, we are looking at, when we talk about the core at elementary, we started off really focusing in on the non-negotiable was our ELA and our math. And then, we are looking at the times we are living in, and obviously living through a pandemic, the sciences, again, this is the new Sputnik. So our science suddenly became a priority. We are going to get that in. And we are also going through some social transitions within our country. And I think it's important that even at the elementary level that we are addressing that as well. And that is accomplished through history. So the core is going to be right now where it's a non-negotiable for us is ELA, math, science, and social studies. And we are looking into other areas as well. We know that there are things that students are traditionally exposed to, and we are going to be putting those into consideration as well.
That's great, thank you. Obviously more work to be done, and you both mentioned work with stakeholders forthcoming toward the end of the week. So I'm sure much more after that. So as we look to transition to talking about middle school, we'll first start with grade 6. So Dr. Robinson, we can flip to that next slide, and Robin Gorey's principal of Gowanna Middle School will actually start off talking about grade 6, because grade 6 is going to look more similar in some ways to K-5 than 7-8. So go ahead, Robin.
Great. First and foremost, we are looking to have the students back here full-time. So we're really excited about that opportunity. And we are looking to have a student orientation for our 6th graders. I think we all realize the importance of having the students come in and learn about whether it's to take a tour of the building, or some of them are getting Chromebooks for the first time to have on their own. What does it look like to be in a part of a team here at the middle school, and the new courses that they get to take. So that's something that we really are looking forward to doing right that first week of school. And we think that it's absolutely necessary for our 6th graders in the transition to coming to this new school. We too are looking forward to collaborating with teachers in the coming couple of days. This will be on Thursday, because we do need to take that deeper look at our scheduling options. Certainly we middle school administrators have multiple different scheduling options that we've looked at, but I can tell you this, is that we are looking at larger blocks of time. We are not looking at every course every day. So that larger blocks of instructional time is really important to us. Going to be very similar to when we look at the 7th and the 8th grade courses as well. We are planning to minimize the cohorts of students each day, or in each class rather, and we're going to extend the passing time. We're looking to do staggered release anytime students are moving from any type of classroom or large instructional room. And similar to the elementary school, there may be some instruction that is delivered remotely within the school. I know that's an option that some of the middle school team has been looking at. So, and also similar to the elementary, we are going to be looking at spaces that we've never thought of before as instructional. So what we may think of as my room is room XYZ right now may not be your room come the fall, because we have to look at this in the perspective of it's different, because if we're pulling in the 6th grade and all students are coming in and our capacity is at 18 in a room, then we obviously know that we're going to be going into additional rooms and additional spaces. So I know that this was a concern and just in terms of the 6th grade, but we are looking at larger instructional blocks of time, not having the students take every course every day. We're committed to that. And we do look forward to working with our team this week to really start to solidify some type of plan. Transitioning then into with our 7th and 8th grade, again, looking to minimize cohorts, extended passing time, staggering the release time in. And again, looking at something similar to 4 classes per day. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in a second. But we are considering the number of classes students are responsible for when in school and when out of school. We think this is important for the students to take that deeper dive into those 4 classes each day. And obviously, everyone that has spoke prior to me has talked about the safety implications of not having 9 groups of students pass through a particular classroom on any given day. So our goal, obviously, when we do develop this schedule more fully, is to ensure that we have both in-person, that synchronous learning, but we also have that asynchronous instruction, and that will help us. And we hope that whatever schedule we definitely determine here, that will help us as we pivot back to the, if in the event we have to pivot back to full online instruction. Of course, we hope that that's not going to be the case. So when at home, students will have academic expectations. And in some cases, we're hoping that they will have some access to teachers, potentially in real time. And we're obviously still working that out. So again, we are looking at every space, and we have to be very creative with our space this year because we do need to accommodate, the 6th grade. We are trying to schedule as many of the, we'll call normal classes as we possibly can. But the words Dr. Robinson used a few minutes ago about spatial relations, that's going to be difficult for some of our courses to be able to do that. So we're going to need to be creative with that. But I'm hoping that we will be able to develop a schedule that can meet the needs of all. And again, that we would be able to utilize, and if we do have to go into that online. So if you want to go to the next slide. What we'd be looking to do is assign, and this is for our 7th and 8th grade specifically, we'd be assigning each group to one, or each student to one of 2 cohort groups, approximately half of the students in on 2 consecutive days, the other half of the students on the following 2 consecutive days. Now that obviously doesn't mean that students are just sitting home and they have a vacation for 2 days. There would be instruction in regards to, there would be work that the students would be expected to be doing during those 2 days when they are not in school. And so, like I said, half of them, they would come in, they would have their 4 classes. And again, this is a model that we have started to take a peek at, but would like to have more discussion on Thursday as well. And so the 2 groups would obviously flip-flop, but it would be 2 consecutive days followed by 2 consecutive days at home. And if you want to go to the next slide. So this is, again, just a singular model here of a draft schedule where it's a block 1, block 2, block 3, and block 4. And as you can see, different from what we've had in the past with our 9 periods, we are very much minimizing all the movement that, or a considerable amount of the movement that we've had, and significantly less students occupying multiple different spaces within the school. But again, next steps for us, we need to work to build a schedule that can allow for these larger blocks of time, so that our goal is obviously to keep our students safe, and to keep our staff safe as well. So I guess I'll turn it over then, unless you have any other questions, Dr. Wood.
Sorry, I think I'm freezing up a little down here. Go right to Ron.
Yeah, so, getting to go last of our elementary and middle school, a lot of what has been said is, I don't want to repeat anything, but we've predicated all of us on the student experience, and what does that look like? Because we actually write that at the top of the whiteboard when we're working. Our students left us March 13th, and they're returning to something that is different. It is not what they were used to. So we try to keep that in mind, and we try not to have those things be adversarial, public health and student experience, because we kind of want them to go seamless together. So we've talked about a number of things for students. What we really wanted to do was make sure we could offer our courses. We have high school students that have been looking to take certain courses for a long period of time. They were excited when they registered for them. And we want to be able to offer all of our courses to our students. So that is a goal of ours, right? We're working through some space issues, and some of the guidelines, do squeeze that a little bit, but that is our plan to be able to do that. Obviously, with public health, reducing transitions is so important. I know I've had some teachers reach out about transitions and how many students they're going to interact with each day. As we look to adjust the schedule, we'll be interacting with half or 60% of your students one day, maybe 40% the next. So from a public health standpoint, those things, they make a lot of sense. But when we get into some of the regulations and the student experience, I think as we look to adjust things, that makes sense as well. Like if we're looking to get 180 minutes, of instruction, typically a student would get 200 minutes of instruction a week in a class. But if we have to extend passing times to move students throughout the building, I don't know that we're going to be able to hit that. I can tell you we're not going to hit that. So that becomes a concern. So as we continue to go through this and we refine it, we're really focusing on those things: student experience, public health, and then the educational experience. And of course, the student experience, what goes hand in hand with that is a teacher experience. If our two students are having a good experience, the teacher experience will follow. So those have been important things. I know we're working through some, you see the bottom of that slide at 12 feet of distancing for some disciplines. So we're working on that, and we have spaces, and we're using a lot of spaces. As you know, we have a capital project going on. I know if we knew we had a pandemic coming this year, we probably would have plan the capital project a little different, but those things don't get to happen. So, but we are able to work through that. And I think we have a really good plan moving forward. As Dr. Robinson said, not done, not 100% done, but in concept, in theory, I think we're going to be able to give our students a decent experience. I think if you move to the next slide, it should be very similar to what we saw with Robin. When we talk about cohort of students, when I first think of cohort, I think of grade level. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about a group of students split in half. So that's what we'll be looking about. Half our students coming in for 2 days, and then they'll be home for 2 days, either synchronous or asynchronous. And some of that's going to depend on the class and how that works. And then returning for 2 days, 2 on, 2 off. Parents will be able to know the days their students are in school. What's also nice about this is if we do have to, we use the word pivot. If we have to pivot to full virtual, we can speculate whether that's going to happen or not. But if we do have to, our students are not running through 9 Google Meets in a day or 8 Google Meets in a day, what it might be. So we would keep the same schedule. If we went virtual, we probably wouldn't have to go up to 50% groups. They could all be in one group if we were to go virtual. But it does allow us to go back and forth between a hybrid and virtual. If you move forward to the next, this is just what you saw at the middle school. I think depending on times, lunch could be during 2 or 3. I was looking at 2, but 3, but it all depends on when this. So it doesn't really matter if it's block 2 or 3. What's interesting is, as we talked about space, and anyone who's been involved with schedule, actually the whole high school faculty knows, there was concern with space, but a 9-period schedule is predicated on being able to take a large population of students and put them in one place, and that helps with space. We can't take 600 students and put them in a cafeteria. So the benefits of all that space and condensing space are kind of evaporated when you can't take large groups of students and put them in one spot. And unfortunately, if we can't do that, we got to spread them out, which then it could potentially impact some of the other disciplines that need 12 feet, music, those kind of things. So we're really trying to make sure our students can have a well-rounded experience when they come to school. So not easy to challenge, but this is a great group. The high school group, they're great. They've been working hard. So we'll continue to do that. Looking forward to getting some feedback and answering questions. And I know we're meeting on Thursday, I believe.
That's great. Thank you. So I just want to emphasize a few points that I heard both Robin and Ron talking about the minimizing cohorts, the numbers of students that other students would come in contact with each day, and the numbers of students teachers would come in contact with each day. I also heard Robin emphasize the student orientation piece. We're actually hoping to do something like that for grades K through 12. We know that we need to provide support for students in the return to school, and we want to make sure we're supporting teachers as well with their professional learning as they gear up for a new plan. So looking at how we can possibly build in some more time for that at the beginning. I also heard, and this is different than where we were at March through June, taking student attendance on a daily basis. The expectation, another enhancement would be that our in-school schedule, if we had to pivot out and go virtual, would hold that same schedule. We know it was very challenging for some of our students and teachers, and that Google Meets got scheduled on top of each other, well-intended, but a problem nonetheless. And so having a fixed schedule that students would work with and teachers would work with would help, and also trying to cut down on the number of transitions out of school every day, and the number of classes that both teachers and students are preparing for, also important. Also want to make sure that we emphasize the point that there is the expectation that if we were to transition to fully online learning at any point, that there is the expectation that synchronous instruction will occur during that time. Very important that we get to those 180 minutes, regardless of whether we're in school or out of school. So points made by all the principals on the call that they are working with groups of teachers to help brainstorm and work through some of the nuances that are required in that next level look, but starting from this place of small cohorts, what we can make work safely, trying to make sure we're attending to the core areas at the elementary and at the secondary, really trying to make sure that students can access all of their courses, some of those electives that they've looked forward to accessing, and we think we found a way to make that work, albeit certainly with some changes that are necessary to make sooner than later. So I'll pass it back to you, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you very much, Ron, Robin, Andy, and Greg. And I hope that those who are listening have an appreciation, if you will, of the magnitude of what we're trying to do and put together as a system. It's a singular plan that takes into consideration multiple parts. Before I go into some questions I was posed, I just want to highlight a couple of things that people also need to know, that all these things that we're doing, many of these things that we're doing, were not even on the radar budgets back in February or prior to that. And so we recognize that there's some fiscal implications we're working on right now. We're still concerned about the potential cuts in state aid. The governor hasn't said anything about it, but we know that's still looming on the horizon. Potential significant cut in state aid. It would be tragic if it occurs, considering the fact that we'll be spending more money on things that we didn't anticipate things on, such as contingency related to staffing, technology, professional development. There's a lot of the questions I just scanned through briefly. Focus on professional development, from developing content, from instructional delivery, be it in a block. A lot of PD is being planned by academic administrators, by building level administrators over the course of August, and quite frank with you, even into September. So for those people who are asking the respective PD related questions, those things are planned. Our objective is to prepare people to be as successful as possible. And so all hands are truly on deck to do so. You'll be hearing more from your respective academic administrators in terms of those specific things that we need to have people trained on or need to have people develop curriculum as we move forward. Transportation, having multiple routes, additional costs, retrofitting buildings, upgrading filtration. We had someone put a question about there's certain areas. We know that, quote unquote, there are certain dead spots areas within buildings, places that weren't necessarily completely designed to be offices that people have used as mini offices. Then we have to look at those facilities and if either it's going to be for a single use or not at all in some instances. So we're looking at all those things. And again, I'm asking folks if they identify those things, bring those things to someone's attention. So if we haven't already addressed it or have it on the radar to address, we certainly don't want to miss it as we move forward. Public use of facility is a big part of this process. We have a lot of people asking right now, when can they use our facilities? When can they use our grounds? The Department of Health standard is basically anyone who's using our facilities or grounds must apply to the same guidelines required that we articulated above. So until we are ready for having a comprehensive plan for reopening, until we have those protocols in place and the capacity to ensure any users are following those protocols, our facilities will remain closed as we move forward. Just some next steps, and I'll go into the questions. As was mentioned several times on this call, representative members of the respective bargaining units will be met with over the course of the coming weeks, from CSCA to STA to SUSA to SAW. We'll be having a lot of conversations, talking about logistics, talking about contractual implications, all those things. I ask, and I sincerely ask that when people come to these conversations to add value. What can I do to try to make this plan as workable as possible? Recognizing, folks, that we are truly doing something, putting something together that was never planned before. Because if it was, we wouldn't be having this live stream session. We would have already had a plan and taken it off the shelf and unveiling it. This is a plan that requires everyone to come with a growth open mindset to make sure we are doing the best we can on behalf of the students that we serve. From a process standpoint, we have ad hoc committees will be meeting several times over the course of the coming week. We'll be working through, again, details in August and September as we move forward. We have a special board meeting on the 28th, which we'll be walking through, again, some of these same specifications, as well as any additional updates between now and the 28th with the Board of Education. Our goal is to submit the plan on July 29th, and I've been fondly saying to our administrators, congratulations, that'll be a present to myself for my birthday, that we hit send and say happy birthday, and hopefully that plan will be accepted. Well, quote unquote, it's not really accepted because the state wants us to attest to certain things. And then our master plan, including a portion of this website and things of that nature, will be posted on our website, SIS social media, so that it's readily available, public facing to those who want to view it as we move forward. And with all that being said, we will still be holding, crossing our fingers, in waiting for the final decision by the governor in terms of reopening of schools. And that decision is supposed to be made between August 1st and 7th. We anticipate, and quite frankly with you, I say plan for, I don't have the details at this point, but we will be allowing or having plans to use particularly maybe that first 4, 5, 6 days of the opening of school for staff training, for staff orientation, because the bottom line is we want to ensure that we have as many I's dotted and T's crossed as we possibly can as we look to reopen fully for our students returning. So with that being said, I just want to read some questions. The questions came into Mrs. DeFiciana. She tried to organize those questions as much as she can in topic areas. A question is very common, and we knew this would be a question. When we talk about repurposing spaces such as libraries and gymnasiums and computer labs, what happened to those individuals? One of the things that we bank on people having a lot of expertise. Librarians, we know, have been tremendous teachers over the years in their respective classes. So we're looking at how do we tap into the expertise of those individuals as we restructure programs at the respective level. We know that will be one of those areas. particularly at elementary level, as they look to look how we deliver content. So those things will happen. And I say that in a sense that because a related question was, will those people be furloughed? No one will be furloughed or fired. We will be asking people to be flexible, to tap into their expertise as much as possible. The state has provided some allowance for people to teach outside of certification areas. We'll be trying to maximize those allowances. But the bottom line is we'll be putting people in situations that they can be successful, recognizing that their success means the success and the quality experience of our students as we move forward. Health screening. Yes, we know that health screening and temp checks are not the only indication. We know that there are people who don't show symptoms, and that's the reason why all those other protocols become so important. The wearing of masks when you're in the school building, the hand sanitizing piece of it, all those things combined together create the best mitigations right now that we have coming from the CDC or any other health authority for that matter. So those are the reason why we're taking all those steps in place. And that's the reason why we're asking students to wear masks when they're in class. We recognize, and again, someone asked, about instruction. Doesn't mean when kids walk in classroom, they take off their masks. No, when kids walk in classroom, they're keeping their mask on. The question is, with social distancing spacing, can you have a kid who's talking to you take a breathing break by pulling the mask down? The answer is yes. Having a mask on and having the mask taking a breathing break is two different things. So we want to make sure we clarify those things. And yes, a lot of this information will be shared and discussed with parents and students in videos, where basically if people witnessed the graduation ceremony that we had and the multiple videos that went out, for example, by the high school administration to parents, we'll be doing tons of those videos. This is what a mask look like. This is what you wear a mask in the classroom. This is how you take a breathing break. All those things will be done over and over and over again. So we're all on the same page and trying to provide the safest environment for everyone. Someone asked, why are we doing this on a live stream versus together? Quite frankly, we're taking advantage of technology. For me to have Mrs. Gories come from the middle school, Ron come from the high school, Andy, all of us trying to come here and clutter around in the DO and have poor camera angles, it's much easier for us to take advantage of technology. This speaks to, quite frankly, what also the classroom experience will also change when we take advantage of integration of technology, even within the classroom space. And so this is a prime example of how we're doing it. On the other side of the coin, this past Thursday, we had our Leadership Academy with all administrators and supervisors back, and we all met and we social distanced in the auditorium. We used various classrooms as breakout space so people can experience what it's like being in a classroom with the social distancing in the classroom. So administrators went through that piece of it because we not only we just can't preach it, but we also have to practice it. Myself personally, all the pictures that you have seen, I've gone into all those spaces to feel it, to experience it, to understand it, to appreciate it as we move forward. So again, to that question, people talk about personal sanitization. Can we get sanitizers for lanyards? Great idea. One we're looking to right now as we speak. The minute that came through, that idea went out to Barb Salica to try to see what's the feasibility of that. With that being said, we have tons and tons and tons of hand sanitizer in supply, will be readily available for people to use throughout the course of the day, not only students, but staff, everyone alike as we move forward. In terms of training, a lot of questions surrounding training, new block schedule. That, as Dr. Wood pointed out in one of the previous slides, is going to be a point of emphasis. Academic administrators are geared up to look at not only content development, but also content delivery. The grading rubric conversations will transpire at departmental discussions in the coming days and weeks as well. So those things will require the input and feedback for teachers as we move forward. Just scrolling through again the questions that were asked. Someone asked about what would students do on the two-day off. I think Mr. Gastononi addressed some of that as well. And in their meeting with their faculty on this coming week, as well as the middle school folks on the leadership of Robin, they'll be having some of those conversations well as we move forward. Someone mentioned that the block schedule is perfect for this, but clearly with the inability to have certain activities because of the space pieces, or in some cases having rooms being fairly empty other than teacher desks and student desks, having manipulatives become somewhat of a challenge. Those are issues, quite frankly with you, we will continue to work through. And so there's certain benefits, tremendous benefits of the block scheduling, a lot of the things that were outlined before, but there are also some constraints, regardless if we were block scheduled or not, that the current situation with social distancing and the spatial relationships that we need in classroom that will impact those things regardless. So we do have to think about and look at how we do certain things differently as we move forward. And again, utilizing technology to modify our approach to certain things as we move forward. Someone asked about written protocols for teachers who are at high risk. And yes, we're in the process now of working through those protocols with our labor attorney, recognizing that there's so many laws, there's state laws, there are federal laws, there are contractual, all these things that are out there. Some of them align very well. Some of them, quite frankly, are contradictory to each other. So we're working through those protocols, and not only will we work through those protocols here at Shen, we have their regional conversations to ensure that school districts within the region have similar templates to use, similar understanding of those protocols, because we can't have one rule here at Shen and another rule in another school district, and then we have people saying who's right, who's wrong. So we're looking at those things from a legal standpoint as well as from a practical standpoint, and those things hopefully will be ready in the coming weeks here as well. Just again, scrolling through, when we already have the data wearing masks, again, the mask question came up. Yes, the expectation is that if you're inside the building, you'll be wearing a mask. And we're all practicing those mask things. I want to say practicing. We do it every day. Personally, myself, I have multiple masks. I have masks that people donate. I have masks that I've gone on YouTube and made myself. Have several masks in the car. We have the Shen mask that I pointed out before that we'll be getting for every employee and every student. And so, yes, people are growing accustomed to wearing masks, and that will be the expectation when you're inside the building, or quite frankly, even outside of the building. Any possibility of interacting with someone with less than 6 feet, you should be wearing your mask, and that is the expectation that we have moving forward as well. A lot of mask-related questions, and the one question about open Google Meets, and again, we'll be using technology. Personally, myself, as we move forward, a lot of the meetings that I have with administrators, when I'm taking people out of the buildings for instance, if you're transitioning from the campus to the DO, or from the DO to the campus, the time lost in travel that we can now pick up by doing things virtually, tremendous use of technology that we're taking advantage of now, and will continue to take advantage of as we move forward. Equipment within classrooms. We're working on equipment right now to try to do online, almost kind of a distance learning type model as we move forward. Yes, great questions. We're looking to that now. Dr. Wood and I was just on a call yesterday with a vendor that has some solutions we're looking at. We have our lead teachers for technology. Those folks are looking at solutions right now, and we want to create the best possible scenarios as we can. So yes, we're looking at those things as we speak to ensure we do so as well. The 6th grade piece of it is people ask about 6th grade. We're looking at the 6th grade piece in terms of the classroom spacing, similar to what we're looking at the elementary space and what we're looking at the high school spacing. And that's the reason why I showed the pictures. We have actually gone into the respective buildings, walking through classrooms, looking at classroom size, looking at classroom shape, looking at what's the classroom purpose, and trying to figure out what's the best configuration of student capacity in some of those buildings. People ask about substitute, the availability of substitutes. Quite frankly, those are huge questions that, in terms of staffing capacity, we have to look for as we move forward. It's no different than the same challenges that we faced prior to COVID, in terms of not only ensure that we have substitute, but now we have to have protocols to ensure that the substitutes are following our health protocols, our certification protocols, and all those type things. So it does add a different dimension in terms of how we engage substitute into the school environment as well. So we're trying to do those things as we move forward. Yes, we are trying to identify a way to use our badges, ID badges, as a way to quick sign in versus people having to touch pens and paper. So we're right now in the process of looking at some solutions. The problem and issue with all these solutions is scalability. How can we scale it out quickly and in a cost effective way to do so? But yes, we are in fact looking at some of those options right now in terms of how do we identify where people are for the various reasons what we articulated before in terms of contact tracing, disinfecting of different areas as we move forward. Just again, scrolling through. Recess activities for children. Those are things that certainly one of the things that the longer block helps, and it was highlighted in one of the slides, probably slightly overlooked. The social emotional piece of it is an important piece of it. It allows for those things. And again, we can't prescribe when those things should occur because we know that the needs will vary. The needs of students will vary, and that the flow and the tempo of classes will also dictate when some of those things happen. But it allows for those things to happen. That's that part of under that social emotional piece that we have to address, not only for students, but also for staff as well as we move forward. Again, sharing of classrooms. If we're transitioning groups from one space to another, the disinfecting or wiping down of classrooms become an important part of our planning process. And subsequently, that's why we're trying to use a cohort model as much as we can. So we minimize the number of transitions that's taking place between spaces so we can appropriately sanitize spaces when people leave from one room to another. Ventilation, as I mentioned before, ventilation is an ongoing piece for us. We're looking at various spaces. We know that there are some spaces now that we may very well have to limit to only singular use as well. People ask about bathrooms, hand-free paper towels. Yes, we invest in a significant amount of money in retrofitting bathrooms to get the hand-free paper towels and things of that nature. We're looking at bathroom spaces. We're fortunate that a lot of our bathrooms, particular student bathrooms, now have stalls, and so social distancing bathrooms, and also, quite frankly, coming up with protocols to make sure that bathrooms don't become an area where congestion of a number of students taking place. So all those things are being considered as we speak and look forward as well. So a lot of questions that are out there, a lot of questions that we're in the process of reviewing. We have spent a lot of time, folks, looking at a lot of documents. In fact, I'm going to tell you every document that's listed on here, I have personally looked at, read, in many places from cover to cover, because the first page here are all the various guidance documents that we received from the state that drive our plan. This page is looking across the country, looking at plans from different states: Maryland, California, Missouri, Georgia, Pennsylvania. We're looking even globally, looking at some of the best practices coming globally to try to influence our plan here at Shen. And so you see over and over a lot of things that we're looking at, because we recognize that in order for us to do this well, we need all hands on deck. That has to be a priority. We need people to be committed to provide the best information, but more importantly, bring an attitude of collective work and responsibility, or should I say reciprocal responsibility. In other words, I need you to be at your best so I could be at my best, and I'm going to be at my best so you could be at your best, because I truly fundamentally believe in this mantra that Shen is in, and if we're going to be in, we got to be in all together as a group. So over the course of the next several days, some of you on this call will be engaged in conversation. Over the course of the next several weeks, all of you will be engaged in the process of developing different things. And certainly as we go into the months of September and October, it's our commitment to excellence, not mine as superintendent, but our collective commitment to excellence. So I ask for each of your patience. I ask for your understanding, and those aren't empty platitudes, sincere requests, because we know that there are many things that we still need to do. And there's a lot of work, folks. There's a lot of work and a lot of people committed to making this a reality. So I'm asking for your best thinking, your best ideas, sharing your best ideas, sharing your best thinking, and bringing that very positive attitude when we all come to work to make these things happen and make the best reality for you as employees and the best reality for our students. So we end with that piece of it. This presentation is being recorded and will be shared out. And again, to create an opportunity so those who weren't on the call will be able to have this to refer back to as we move forward. We submit our plan on the 29th, and that's step number 3. Step number 4 through 20 is all the work, folks, that we're going to have to do when we all start to come together, either strategically in small groups or when we start coming together collectively as a whole. So I appreciate your understanding, and to my my colleagues who have been leading this charge, thank you very much for your due diligence. And thank you much for today. This is our second live stream session, an hour and a half each one of them. And we'll be doing another one tonight, starting at, I think, 5 or 5:30 for our parents group. And we'll repeat this again. So just to think about just today and the amount of mental energy and time, much less the time that's already gone into developing the plans, and then having folks who are on this call or otherwise engage in this process to address the nuances, to address those things, the finer points that make this a quality experience for everyone. So thank you all very much for your time, your attention, and we're looking forward to making sure that as a school system, we continue our commitment to excellence. Thank you very much. And I'm going to stop recording right now.